ever get that feeling? Like you're surrounded by people,
Right.
maybe at a party or even just scrolling through tons of profiles online. But still, there's this like hollow feeling deep down.
Yeah, that sense of disconnect, like you're not really connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then let's be honest, trying to figure out what men actually want in a relationship, what they really value, feels like, I don't know,
A puzzle.
a puzzle, yeah. Especially these days, right?
Definitely. And it's something we hear a lot, particularly from men who are trying to navigate, well, all the complexities of modern relationships.
That's exactly what we're diving into today, right? This whole idea of male loneliness and what men are honestly looking for in a partner.
Yeah, and we've gone pretty deep, honestly, looking at all sorts of perspectives to really grasp not just, those surface level wants,
Right.
but also the deeper stuff, the psychological and societal factors that are really at play here.
I think what we're aiming for is to give everyone listening a clearer picture, a much clearer picture of what's going on.
A sort of shortcut.
Yeah, a shortcut to understanding some of the maybe surprising truths and some real actionable insights about this whole thing, this male loneliness and what they desire in relationships. We're going to try and shed light on the stuff that often doesn't get talked about.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right in. Let's talk about this landscape of male loneliness. And I think it's important right off the bat to say loneliness, it impacts everybody.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But what we're seeing, at least from what we've looked at, is that it may actually hit men in a more, I don't know, a more profound way.
Possibly, yeah. There's definitely evidence pointing in that direction. And
Right.
and one thing that really stood out in our research was how much reduced in-person socializing, since the pandemic and all that has played a role.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like for guys, a lot of times those connections, they form through doing stuff together.
Right, shared activities.
Yeah, exactly. Sports, hobbies, even just working side by side.
Absolutely.
And now with so much remote work, those opportunities, they're less frequent.
Far fewer, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's a big shift, especially when you compare it to like how women tend to connect. I mean, they often keep those close bonds going through phone calls, more, I don't know, more direct emotional conversations.
Right, right. It's a different style, for sure.
Definitely. And there's even this thought that maybe shared activities are so key for men because they offer this kind of like a roundabout way to connect. It's less about, just pouring your heart out, which can feel a bit, I don't know, intense for some guys.
Like vulnerable, maybe.
Vulnerable, exactly. It's more about building that camaraderie, that trust through doing something together. And the pandemic, it kind of took a lot of those natural settings away.
Yeah, those shared spaces just poof, vanished.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got this whole thing with men moving away from what's often called toxic masculinity, trying to embrace healthier ways of showing vulnerability.
Yeah, but it's messy.
Right. Oh, it's a complicated process, no doubt.
Because, I mean, some of what we saw suggested that women aren't always, super supportive in that.
Right. It's not always a smooth path.
Like, there isn't always that grace, that understanding when a guy tries to express emotions that go beyond just anger,
And then you have to consider those messages that still exist in certain, male circles where showing any kind of vulnerability is seen as weak.
So it's like a double whammy. Like, where can guys turn? It feels like a real bind.
It does raise a crucial question about the support that's actually available to men who are trying to make this shift. I mean, if the goal is for them to be more open, more vulnerable, then creating those safe spaces, environments where it's okay to express a whole range of emotions, that's got to be a priority.
Otherwise, yeah, it's going to make things harder. And it's not just about, individual interactions, right? It's also about those bigger shifts happening in family dynamics and gender roles. Like, we've moved away from those clear-cut traditional expectations.
Which is, in many ways a positive thing, a move towards equality. But it also means that couples, they really need to be on the same page. They need to communicate much more directly, especially when it comes to, like, household responsibilities. Who does what?
Oh, yeah. If that's not clear, it can cause a lot of friction.
Absolutely. Resentment can build up really quickly. And if you think about it, it's all part of this larger societal shift towards, a more equal partnership model, which is, on the whole, a good thing, right? But the thing is, without those clear-cut norms, couples, they have to figure it out themselves.
They have to negotiate.
Exactly. They have to be good at communicating, and those are skills that, well, not everyone has mastered,
And unspoken expectations. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster.
Pretty much. Misunderstandings are almost inevitable. And then there's this other point that really stuck with me. It's this idea that women are increasingly looking to their partners, their male partners, as their primary source of like everything,
Uh,
emotional support, happiness.
like their whole world.
Yeah, almost like they're expecting their partner to fill the role that an extended family used to.
Wow, it's a lot of pressure.
It is to put all of that on one person. That's bound to lead to some feelings of isolation for men. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah.
And it might even make it harder for them to open up, to be vulnerable themselves.
Especially if they feel like they have to be the strong one, the one holding everything together. And then they might not feel like they can reach out for support from others, you know, build their own networks.
Right, because they're so focused on being the support system for their partner.
Yeah, it's a lot to carry. But okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about what men are actually looking for in a relationship. What are their needs and desires? And one thing that came up over and over again in our research was this really basic, really fundamental need to feel wanted, needed, and useful.
To feel like they have a purpose in their partner's life.
Exactly. And that sense of purpose, that contribution, it seems to be a big part of what makes a relationship feel strong, feel committed.
It really speaks to that innate human need to feel competent, capable. When a man feels like he has a meaningful role, like his actions matter, it boosts his self-esteem, it strengthens that bond with his partner.
And here's where things get really interesting. One of the things that came up in the research was this idea that while the women's rights movement has brought about, obviously incredibly important and positive changes, there's this suggestion that maybe an unintended consequence has been, in some cases, a sort of undermining of masculinity.
It's a very nuanced point, and it's definitely not about taking a step back from progress, but it is about recognizing that maybe this push for complete female independence, it can be problematic because in reality, we're not completely independent, are we?
Right, we rely on each other.
We live in an interdependent society. Both men and women, we bring different things to the table,
Yeah.
different strengths. And this idea that being completely independent is always the goal, it can actually devalue that sense of purpose, that feeling of being needed, that a lot of men find fulfilling.
Right. And the research really highlighted this link between men's self-esteem and feeling useful, receiving positive feedback for what they do. But it seems like sometimes there are these mixed messages coming from women.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, like, on the one hand, there's this expectation for men to be proactive, to take initiative, right? But then on the other hand, there might not be, like, a willingness to let them fully step into those roles.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
It could be, a fear of dependence, or maybe a fear of control, like not wanting to rely too much on a man or not wanting to feel controlled by him. But the problem is it creates this frustrating situation for guys. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Right, they're in a no-win situation, and so they might end up just being more passive, which, ironically, often isn't seen as attractive either.
Talk about a catch-22.
Oh.
It really underscores how important it is for couples to communicate clearly about what they expect from each other and to be genuine with their appreciation.
Absolutely, and to recognize that healthy relationships, they're about give and take. They're about relying on each other, supporting each other. It's not about, one person being totally independent and the other being totally dependent.
Right. And that leads us to this idea of compatibility. And it's not about forcing someone into a certain role, but more about finding a partner whose natural inclinations, whose strengths complement your own, and who can fulfill, a needed role in the relationship. But obviously, it's got to be based on mutual agreement, mutual
Right.
respect.
Exactly. It's about finding someone who fits, who brings something to the table that you need, and vice versa.
Right. And that can make things feel so much more natural, less forced.
Mm-hmm.
So moving beyond those core needs, let's talk about some of the maybe less obvious qualities that really attract good men. And one that really stood out to me was authenticity.
Like just being yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In a world where everyone's trying to, present this perfect image, just being genuine, being real, that's what attracts men.
It makes sense. It's refreshing. It cuts through all the BS, all the carefully curated personas. Like, okay, here's someone who's comfortable with who they are. I can connect with that.
Right. And then closely tied to that is being a good communicator.
Oh, absolutely.
The research really emphasized how much that matters, like how you communicate, the respect you show in your speech, that speaks volumes about your character, about your values.
Yeah, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. And good communication, that's the foundation of any strong relationship.
And then there's this concept of a complementary spirit.
Ooh, I like that. What does that mean?
It's like when you just click with someone on a deeper level, like your personalities align, you understand each other's way of thinking, and it just makes things flow, less conflict, more harmony.
That sounds like relationship bliss.
Right. It's like finding that missing piece. And finally, the research really stressed this point. Good men, they're drawn to a woman's inner qualities, her personality, her self-respect. Those are the things that last.
Way more than just looks.
Exactly. It's about who she is on the inside, how she carries herself, the respect she has for herself.
That's what makes her truly beautiful.
Okay, so now let's get into some of the maybe less talked about desires, the things that men might not always be upfront about. And one that really caught my attention was this desire for a realistic portrayal, like of the relationship, of who they are as individuals.
So not pretending everything is perfect all the time.
Exactly. It's not about constant positivity, but about being able to acknowledge the challenges, the difficult stuff, in an honest way.
Because that's real life, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect, and no relationship is perfect.
And pretending it is, that just creates distance. It erodes trust.
It's much healthier to be able to face those challenges together.
Absolutely. And then another thing that came up was intellectual humility.
Humility.
Yeah, like being open to different perspectives, admitting when you're wrong.
Yeah.
Just having that curiosity to learn and grow.
Nobody wants to be with someone who thinks they know everything.
Right. Intellectual humility shows that you're willing to learn, to grow, which is so important in a relationship. And then there's this really crucial one, emotional safety.
Oh, that's huge.
Men, they need to feel like they can be vulnerable, like they can open up without being judged, without being ridiculed.
They need to know that their partner is a safe space, a place where they can be themselves without fear.
Without feeling like they're going to be shamed or emasculated.
And that's essential for intimacy, for building that deep connection.
Absolutely. And then finally, there's this really interesting point about the impact of authentic vulnerability from women.
So it's not just on the men to be vulnerable.
Exactly. It's a two-way street. What we saw in the research was that when women are willing to share their own insecurities, their own feelings, it encourages men to do the same.
Like it gives them permission to open up.
It shows them that it's safe. And it creates this shared space of openness, which can really deepen that emotional connection.
It's about leading by example,
Mm.
showing that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's actually a strength.
Right. So let's talk about something a little bit less rosy. Let's talk about misunderstandings, about deception in relationships.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, because one thing the research pointed out is that men are often drawn in, at least initially, by this idealized image of women.
Like a fantasy.
Kind of like this
Yeah.
perfect image that might not actually reflect reality.
So how do you get past that?
It's about moving beyond that initial attraction, that idealized image, and getting to know the real person, the flaws, the imperfections, all of it.
Because that's what makes someone unique. Hi.
And lovable. But sometimes women might underestimate how intimidating they can be to men, especially early on.
Really?
Yeah, it's often rooted in a fear of rejection. Like, the more attracted a man is, the more afraid he might be of being rejected.
That's interesting. Like, the higher the stakes, the higher the fear.
Exactly. And there was this analogy in the research about the hero's journey. Like, a man might feel like he has to overcome this almost larger-than-life image of a woman in his mind
Okay.
to connect with the real person standing in front of him.
Wow, that's a powerful image. It really speaks to the courage it takes to be vulnerable, to risk rejection.
Okay, and now for the maybe not so fun part.
Hit me with it.
Lies men tell women.
Ooh, juicy.
Yeah, but also important to know, because it can help you avoid heartache. So let's run through the 6 big ones that came up. Number 1, not looking for anything serious.
Classic.
Right. And the advice here is simple. Believe him. Don't waste your time hoping he'll change his mind.
Don't settle for less than what you want.
Exactly. Number 2, she's just a friend, but his behavior is telling a different story.
Red flag alert.
Trust your gut. Pay attention to those boundaries. If there's secrecy, if he gets defensive when you ask about her, that's a problem.
Healthy friendships don't involve secrecy and defensiveness.
Right. Number 3, I'll change, but there's no action to back it up.
Words are cheap.
Look for those behavioral changes. Look for consistent effort over time.
And remember, you're not responsible for fixing him.
Exactly. Number 4, I just need some space, but it's vague, it's unexplained. This can be a slow fade, a way of avoiding a real breakup.
Give him space, but on your own terms. And be prepared for the possibility that it's over.
Right. If he's truly invested, he'll communicate clearly about what he needs and reassure you that he's coming back. Number 5, it's not you, it's me.
Oh, come on.
Classic deflection. Don't internalize it.
It's a way of avoiding responsibility.
And finally, number 6, I love you, but it doesn't feel genuine.
Actions speak louder than words.
Pay attention to how he treats you, how he shows up for you. If his actions don't match his words, trust your instincts.
If something feels off, it probably is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that male loneliness is a real issue, shaped by so many factors, from societal expectations to evolving ideas about masculinity and what men truly desire in a relationship. It goes way beyond the surface.
That's about feeling needed, feeling valued, feeling safe to be themselves.
And being with someone who's authentic, who's open to learning, who's willing to be vulnerable too.
And I think this brings us to a final question for you to ponder. How do we find that balance between independence and interdependence? Not just in our romantic relationships, but in our lives as a whole.
How do we create spaces where both men and women can feel empowered, feel supported, without feeling like they have to do it all on their own?
It's a complex issue, but I think it's a conversation worth having.
Definitely. And maybe, just maybe, some of the insights we've explored today can offer a new perspective as you navigate your own relationships.
And as we continue to evolve as a society.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Until next time.